Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, tech industry podcast presented by D&I Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. It sounds so weird when I say it. I keep trying to do it different ways, but oh well. It's Thursday at 7 p.m. GMT. We're live on twitch.tv/D&I Stream. I'm Josey Howarth, and as always, I am joined by my better than your so-called god, Chris Seebach. What the hell?
Did you not read the script?
You know why I didn't read the script? Because I just got out of a meeting not too long ago. So I didn't read it. But you know what? You're perfect in every possible way, Chris. So it's fitting.
And omnipotent and omnipresent as well.
Omnipresent and omnipotent. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so yes, thank you very much, Josey, and thank you to everybody, or hello, rather, to everybody in chat. Not thanks yet, thanks after the show.
Well, no, thanks for showing up.
Thanks for showing up, of course.
On
yes.
time.
And yeah, wow. It's wonderful. And we've already had some people complain in chat that we weren't here last week. We, unfortunately, I had a bereavement, and Josey was very, very busy, so we couldn't do the show last week, so sorry about that. But yes, please do get involved with the show. It is live. We do respond to comments, so we will get you involved if you ask something or say something.
Yeah. So before we get going, as always, it is time for our icebreaker question, which generally has nothing to do with anything to do with what we talk about. It's just sort of a way to have a bit of fun and get to know each other better. So for you who are listening in the chat, and those of you in the future, and Chris, who is here now, here's my question for you. What sport would be improved if alcohol was forced on the players?
Right. Whenever I'm taking the mick out of sports, it's always football, because I just despise football. I'm really not a big fan at all. A little fan.
Okay, I have to. As an American, I have to go. He means soccer.
Proper football, yes. Right. Real football, not fake pansy football that you get in America.
Pansy football. Wow, them's fighting words.
Just waiting for a reaction there.
That's the thing. I'm not a fan of it.
Sport that would be what? Improved if you had alcohol?
Improved if alcohol was forced on the players. Yeah.
Well, I think it would be something like... I'm going to go with something... I was going to say darts, but they all drink anyway, don't they? Then maybe they're not allowed to officially now.
Well, see, that's the thing. Back in the day, and this is something I learned, because when I moved over here, I got slightly obsessed with darts and poker. But they used to get paid per beer they drunk, because they were drinking a particular type of beer, or per cigarette they smoked, or something like that, because they were advertising the people who supported them.
Yeah.
So to me, when I started watching darts, it was kind of already included alcohol. For me, I think it would have to be something a little bit more cerebral. So perhaps chess.
Is that a sport?
It is.
Is it officially a sport in the law?
Oh, come on. Oh, it's a game.
It's a game. That doesn't make it a sport.
To me, it does.
I don't know. I think the definition of sport is something that you play competitively that is, that has two sides or something like that. I can't remember the exact definition.
You've just described chess.
Just saying that then, yeah, okay, that maybe is the case. I think for darts was a bad example. I think for me it'd be something like... I had a good one a minute ago. It's gone. Because I'm reading chat and people are saying yes. Drunk spear throwing. Chess is Olympic. Chess Olympics? Wow. I didn't know that.
Gold medal in chess.
We were just talking about chess just before the show, actually, Josey and I.
Yes.
And then Volstrat has said, what sport wouldn't be improved?
Faradell says fencing.
Fencing,
On
yes.
guard.
I mean, I'd say, again, I'm not a particular fan, but something like golf, because it'd make it a little bit more interesting, Anything that requires precision.
Ooh, snooker and snooker.
Drunk Formula One racing.
No, that's dangerous. Don't drink and drive.
But it's not. I don't think it's illegal, because you're in a private track. It's only illegal to drink.
I still would not want to risk my life. I mean, at least if you get drunk playing chess, the most you're going to do is potentially, I don't know, swallow one of the pieces or drunkenly punch a person.
You just use the terms, I don't want to risk my life, and then combine it with Formula One. That's what they do. That's the remit.
But see, they do it with sharp senses. You don't drink and drive is bad, okay?
So, Exigeti, I think that's the right way to pronounce it. Exigeti46 has said drunk StarCraft 2. So, esports, maybe, if they forced it on the players.
See, it would be interesting to see, because I know some players in MMOs who seem to get better when they drink. I'd love to see their APMs in comparison. So it would have to be tested. And I'm sure there's, actual esports people out there that could give us a baseline in comparison based on how much they've actually drunk or not. So
I think there's a level, isn't there, with not physical sports, but gaming, that there's a nice level when I play an FPS where I'm brilliant when I've had a few drinks, like a beer or two, and
you relax enough to not be so uptight, and which can actually cause issues with stuff.
I've got a friend who's a very, very good FPS player, not competitive, but very, very good. He used to play in my clan years ago, and he's the same. He, whenever we have a LAN party or anything, he'll have a few drinks and he'll be like, "Oh, I'm getting into this now," and he'll be. Honestly, his frag counts will fly up. He'll be out of, he'll be absolutely destroying us all. And then a few drinks later, he'll be at the bottom of the leaderboard constantly because he's just way too gone to take it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted by chat. Faradol says I've done drunk, elite, dangerous. Insurance got involved. Please don't fly spaceships while drunk. Oh my gosh. And we had the Shock say, Exegetes say, I don't know if the MMOs are hitting 200 APM. Are they? I think it depends on your GCD, to be perfectly honest. But, who knows?
So I think these terms came in after I stopped playing MMOs, because I'm not sure what either APM or GCD
Actions
is.
per minute. So it's the kind. It's like how fast. Have you never watched like the StarCraft things where they actually show how many buttons and how fast they're pressing the buttons and all the other stuff that goes with it, APMs and stuff like that?
No, I haven't, because I just don't. I'm not into esports. I love games. I'm just not into esports. I don't really like being competitive when I play games.
Oh, and yeah, GCD equals global cooldown. Thank you, Exegeti.
Right, well done, because I had no idea. I mean, I'm so old these days. I'm older
than you.
I was a esports player back when all these things didn't exist, and when it was cool to just kill people and win the £1,000 bounty prize or something, when it isn't millions of pounds involved or dollars or whatever they call it.
See, I got into a competition, and I was involved back in the day when women still weren't really looked at like players. And I went with a whole bunch of people who were in my university at the time together, and we did a Counter-Strike tournament at a local LAN overnight at a computer shop with pizza and all the other good stuff that goes with it. And I ended up in a match where the rest of my team died. I was the only one left, and I just got shot because they all decided to run in Dust 2, of all things, down the same freaking alley right into. I was just like, crosshair, boom, 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 boom. And oh my gosh, the shock of people, it just went silent. And they're just like, and I went, yay. Like, that was my entire reaction. And it was just like, so weird. Yeah.
I remember the days. People used to get very, very, very upset when they lost at computer games. And I used to get very upset when we lost clan games back in the day. Because there was a lot riding on it,
I never did that. I guess so. The thing is, I was a part of a group when I came back, when I moved over to the United Kingdom. I was a part of a group known as the PNL, the Pot Noodle Losers. Sorry, Pot Noodle Lamers. Well, losers and lamers, we could never really figure out what we wanted to be, but thank you to my husband for reminding me.
Yeah, we had lots of fun times. Anyway, should we get onto the subject, the more serious thing that's probably going to make chat shut up entirely, because it's not as fun as our icebreaker questions normally.
Oh, but see, it can be fun. The moment you apply some level of excitement to a topic, you can learn it, right?
Volstratch just said, so what's the topic again?
APMs, GCDs, GCDs.
We'll do a side podcast, and we'll just talk about games, because I miss my gaming podcast.
Love that.
I really
do
miss
too.
my gaming podcast.
Oh my gosh! But see, that's the thing. I met you through doing a podcast about gaming because I was involved in game journalism. I miss that. We really should look at it. Just something we do like maybe once a month or something, or once a quarter.
DNI, the something needs a call on. Right. Anyway, so. Today's show is a continuation of a few weeks ago, the last time we did a podcast, which is it's called More Scrum to Come because Volshrat in chat came up with it during the show because we said we were going to have to do another show, and it was good. It's great, perfect title. So we've stolen that off him. We're not paying you any royalties. If we make £1 million off this episode, it's not. It's all ours. But yes, anyway. So thank you very much, Volshrat. Much appreciated.
Well, if nothing else, we'll ensure that you at least have a very good computer chair.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, come on!
What?
We have to be nice.
Well, maybe if you're lucky, we'll give you a free something we've got free from one of our sponsors. Maybe.
Oh, I know, a can of air.
I've got a can.
You couldn't go wrong
4
with that.
cans of air over there.
Fresh air, just a can of fresh air.
Well, it's not that fresh. It's been in the can for years, so. Anyway, right,
wow.
So let's move on. So anyway, Josey, last time we talked about Scrum. So Scrum is a framework we use in the software development world not just software development, but generally we are software developers. So or I am at least anyway, and we tend to use Scrum as a framework to organize ourselves and organize teams. So last time we defined what Scrum was. We're not going to do that again today because we've already talked about our icebreaker for about half an hour, so we haven't got time anyway. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the pros and cons of it and maybe clear up any things that were unclear last time. So I'm going to ask you, Josey, is there anything that is unclear from last week's episode that you don't feel you understood or you don't feel that you got? Or is anybody in chat that has any kind of questions about what we were talking about?
Well, no, not necessarily. For me, it was understanding the definition in terms of the roles. I mean, you see them tossed around. Scrum Master. What's a ceremony? Huh? What's the purpose of a role? What the heck is Agile in relation to Scrum? Like, how does this all kind of fit together? Like, having the ability for you to go over, for example, the Agile Manifesto and how Scrum sort of fits in with everything. It made sense. I mean, you actually spoke in a language that I was able to completely and utterly understand you, which is normal, but I don't always understand everything that people say because sometimes I can be slow. So for me, I feel very comfortable, at least with what I would consider a foundation, the ability to understand. Now, obviously, I think anyone who might be getting involved in Scrum might be a little, I'd say, nervous about being involved in something that they don't know very well. Like, for example, if you are a team that is decided, we're going to try Scrum, and nobody has experience with Scrum, that can be daunting, et cetera. But then again, taking on anything new is daunting. If you just embrace things to the best of your ability or hire a consultant who is good at it to come in and at least help explain things, that's an option too. I mean, Chris is for hire.
I am. And that's what I'm doing. That's one of the things I'm doing at the moment as well for one of my clients.
Yeah, it is.
Is essentially, as I said the last week, a Scrum Master is really, if you look at it with a critical eye, regardless of all the definitions that are out there for a Scrum Master or even the official definition, a Scrum Master is a trainer. It is the person in the team who keeps people on track with the framework. And I mean, that's what I'm acting as a Scrum Master, but I'm also acting as a consultant, like an outside consultant that's specifically coming in to not just align the team and get the team kind of working efficiently together using this new framework, but also lots of other things I'm doing as well to do with code and architecture and things like that. But yes, the Scrum Master is they're not necessarily a key player because my role as a Scrum Master is actually quite minimal. I don't do much as a Scrum Master. I am this servant leader that kind of no, not having that. So I'm someone who basically enables everybody and makes them I don't make them adhere to something, but I help them understand why it's important to do things a certain way and help them understand and kind of wheedle things out of people and make people make people think that they've come to the realization that this is the right way to do it, if you know what I mean. So I'm a manipulator as well in a way, but I do that. I lead by enabling other people and by serving the entire team. by making people, and one of the definitions of a Scrum Master is somebody who is a servant leader, who serves everybody in the team, the developers and the product owner, because remember, there's only the 3 roles that exist, and leads them by enabling them, by making them understand what the framework is, and evangelizing the ceremonies and evangelizing the Agile manifesto, and trying to keep people on track. And we do lose track every now and again. People who are Scrum Masters, in fact, people in the team.
Well,
go on. Said a couple of sprints ago.
I was going to say that's. Oh, well, no. Go ahead.
I think there's a delay. Sorry, Josey. I think that's probably what's going on there.
Yeah, there does seem to be a small delay.
Hopefully that'll rectify itself.
Face.
If not, we shall do a refresh of the browser and figure that out. Anyway, so a couple of sprints ago, the Scrum team that I'm enabling at the moment, the sprint planning, no, the other one, the Scrum, the morning Scrum started to extend a little bit further for about 3 days in a row.
You mentioned this.
It started, instead of it being 15 minutes, it became 20 minutes. Then it became 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 minutes. And it's like, although they're just minutes, it's like we have to focus on what you're talking about during those meetings. It's not just about robotically outputting, I did this yesterday, I'm doing this today, I've got these blockers. It's about discussing those blockers. The key thing is understanding what you can do to enable people. In today's meeting, for example, I identified very quickly, and this is usually the product owner that does this kind of thing, but the Scrum Master can enable this and help this. I identified that there was a ticket. Tomorrow is our sprint finish, and I identified there's a ticket that was on somebody's plate, and they didn't have time to do it, but somebody else had free capacity. So the cross-functional part of the team comes in there, and I said, actually, Jeff, can you do this? Because Sarah's not got enough time. And we negotiated and figured out how we could get it done. It turns out that nobody had enough time because this whole sprint has been a bit of a nightmare, but that happens occasionally. So the focus is trying to get to that goal together, you see.
Well, see, that's, I think, one of the beautiful things about Agile in general is the fact that you can have those momentary pitfalls and then recover because you are doing a repetitive thing in a very short time frame. So, like, you do have the ability to do a reevaluation, to sit there and go, okay, this needs to be fixed, or, we need to actually do a little bit of a modification in how we're distributing points. Maybe you guessed how you want to actually gauge that wrong. But that's the thing. It's meant to allow you to have flexibility. I mean, this is what I've gotten from you. Now, we did have a good question come in from Exagit, who says, what's the minimum team size to apply Scrum to?
2 people. Because that's a team. As soon as you have more than one person and you've got a lot of work to do, and you want to work in a collaborative way, Scrum can apply. Now, I tend to work in teams. It's more about the maximum size more than anything. You can't do Scrum on your own because what's the point? You can use the tools that Scrum provide. You can use your Kanban boards and you can use your burn down charts to see
and you can sprint and
to figure out your velocity and figure out. But all of that kind of stuff is cross-functional. I mean, we can use that in lots of different. We can use that in Lean. We can use that in Kanban. We can use that in Waterfall if we really want to, in a sense, because we still need to split our tasks down and figure out what we need to do. But the absolute minimum team that you can have is 2. I probably wouldn't do it with less than, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 people. But generally, 5 to 6 people is a good team size. Any more than that, I think I've seen teams up to 10, and I think it gets a bit unwieldy. You can't really fit the
I don't think you can fit a good daily Scrum in there.
Exactly, and I mean, the more people involved, the greater your capacity for the week, for the 2 weeks or whatever, and the more work you've got to do, and the longer your sprint planning meetings, and the more conversations you're going to have, and the more derailing you're going to have. So small team sizes is generally better, but too small, and it's diminishing returns.
Right. And Voltcrack adds, no idea if there is any room for this question in this episode, but as an advocate of Scrum, comparing it, would you say there are any significant shortcomings compared to traditional or other agile approaches? Also, can you think of situations where you would advise against an agile approach like Scrum? And it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that we do want to discuss in this episode are things like pros, cons, benefits, drawbacks, etc. So you have hit on one of the key things we want to bring up. Full chat. So, okay.
Well done.
And continuing on with Exegete.
There was a few questions there. There was a few questions that Volstrat asked in one sentence, so I just wanted to be clear about them. So first of all, it is, are there any shortcomings of Scrum or any other agile thing based on, things like traditional waterfall approaches, I assume he's referring to? And also, can you think of situations that would advise against agile approaches like Scrum? Okay, right. Okay, just wanted to get my head around what the two questions were, because there's a lot of text there. And then there was somebody else that's asked a question, which is
Exegete. Yep,
46.
Exegete, who's continued on with the question about the minimum team size, saying with 2, one of them would be the Scrum Master, so you're down to 1 again. And I think it's something you might want to do, Exegete, if you get a moment. Unfortunately, it's not up because we've been really busy, and I totally, take the slack for this, because it's usually on me to get the episodes back up on Spotify, Apple, and all the other stuff. They will be up on Monday, or at least the first episode of our conversation about Scrum, where we actually talk about how the Scrum Master works.
Yeah, we define the roles and we define the process more than anything.
Which can very easily be one person. I mean, you don't spend your entire time as Scrum Master walking around with like a whip going, Scrum!
No. Well, you do in some situations.
I was about to say, I take that back. There can be moments for that as well. But we can give you a quick answer, roughly, if you want to just very briefly, like very, very quickly, because I'm about to sneeze, just define the Scrum Master role.
So with 2 of them, one would be the Scrum Master, so down to 1 again. That's the thing that we're answering here. No, because the Scrum Master is a role, but the Scrum Master can also be, normally not the product owner as well, but also they can also be a developer, which is part of the development team. So the Scrum Master is a role. It's a hat that somebody puts on to enable the rest of the team, to help them along, to lead them in a way that is helpful to them, to make sure that people hit the goals, to make sure that everybody's attending ceremonies and that kind of thing. It's not cracking the whip in any way, shape or form. It's almost like making people excited for it and making them understand why we do it this way and showing that this is productive. So I'm the Scrum Master, but I'm also a senior developer and doing a lot of work in the project, writing a lot of code, and also mentoring people and helping with architecture and helping with various other bits and bobs for the project. So I'm not just limited to 1. Now, officially, you can have 2. You need a minimum of 2 people, because you wouldn't need to have a framework that's based on collaboration if you've only got 1 person, because you've got nobody to collaborate with. So you could have a product owner as 1 developer. You're still muted, by the way, Josey, if you are trying to
I was just saying the voices in my mind would be fantastic to work in collaboration.
Yes, indeed.
So, that could work.
So you could have 2 developers on the team, or just 1 developer on the team if you really are mad. I mean, that's a bit daft, but you can have 1 product owner who's a developer, and also 1 Scrum Master who's also a developer. So you could have 2 development team members and a Scrum Master and a product owner, really. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that. I say ridiculous. It's possible, but I mean, I probably wouldn't apply Scrum to 2 people, because there's not... Yeah, you get diminishing returns. There's a lot of process involved for 2 people who are just working together and bouncing off each other, But you still need somewhere to list the tasks you've got to do and measure that if you're in a business, usually. So back to Volstrat's questions. I suppose we're looking at the pros and cons, or rather the cons of Scrum. I think. I mean, as he said, it is a long-winded question, and I'm usually very long-winded in my answers as well. So welcome to the club, Volstrat. But should we talk about the Should we try and cover this by talking about the cons of Scrum and Agile and where it falls down or where it can fall down? Because I'm an advocate. I love it. I think it's a really good way to work. It's a very honest way to develop software.
I think it's important to note that there's a couple of different types of drawbacks. For example, I haven't had an experience with Scrum really because I do so much solo work. And whenever I have spoken with other developers who will be on what we'll call the anti-Scrum wagon, it tends to be more from their view of what they feel Scrum is, or they've experienced a poor Scrum
team, organization, master.
Yeah,
it could
exactly.
be a pure Scrum Master who's not on the ball and who's not advocating it. It could be someone who doesn't take charge of the product owner role, who's been designated that role. If you've got a poor product owner, you've got nobody to answer to. And that's quite often a big problem in a Scrum team.
So one of the things I did in our fantastic show notes, because we're so organized on this topic, look at us, was I wrote down some of the fears that I've heard people say, like why it is they don't really want to mess with Scrum or why they're hesitant to do anything with Scrum. So the very first thing is, well, how can we implement Scrum if we have legacy processes already in place? Like long drawn out process. How do you make that migration and change? Like, do you need to put development time aside for it? Am I losing resources in order to implement Scrum? Is it really complex? Like, that is one of the very key things that I've heard from people who are hesitant to even touch.
There is an overhead to it, but there is also an overhead to running around like a headless chicken without any process in place. There's also an overhead and a major blockers involved in legacy processes like waterfall, whereas Scrum is more flexible in general because it's this circular, cyclical process that constantly feeds into itself on short iterations, and that's one of the key differences between that and waterfall.
Right.
Yes, the overhead is significant at the start, but the beauty of Scrum is that as long as you stick to the rough framework, you can alter it and introduce new things as time goes on. You don't have to do it all from day dot. You don't have to go, right, every single day we're having a Scrum meeting. You could start with that. You could say, right, let's start off and have a Scrum meeting every day and get into that process. And this is how I do it with a lot of my clients who come from, say, like a public sector kind of focused background, who are very old school, very waterfall driven, people who are, older developers that maybe aren't used to it and just see it as a fancy bling, fancy word that they don't really understand. I introduce them slowly to the ceremonies. So the first sprint, you might be doing a daily sprint every day, a daily Scrum every day. A second sprint, you might want to introduce
to say a daily sprint is terrifying.
Yes, it is. Well, I wouldn't like to be doing the sprint planning and the sprint. Yeah, that's mad.
No.
And then the next sprint, you might introduce
a mad lad thing.
You might introduce the sprint planning meeting, because as you do the sprint and you start, or you might introduce the Kanban board the next time. You might want to do that from the beginning. I don't know, because you always have to have a backlog as well to work from in a sprint environment, but usually most businesses have some kind of backlog, whether it's just a spreadsheet that's full of tasks that are allocated to people, or a Gantt chart that shows like a project hierarchy, which isn't the same thing, but it kind of gives you an idea that there is X amount of work to do in Y time. But Scrum is about, or one of the things that we do when we're grooming a backlog, is that we are splitting tasks or splitting user stories or splitting features or epics or whatever we want, however we want to categorize the work that we've done, splitting that down into individual tasks that developers can do, or individual tasks or backlog items that an entire team can do. How you do that and how you split that out is entirely down to you and the team that you're working with, and the skills that are in that team almost determine how that works. We're still, with this company that I'm working with at the moment, we're still refining that process, and we're 8 sprints in. We've only just got to a point where I've been able to introduce the concept of things like story points, and we've started to see, out of the last 3 sprints, we've started to see a velocity come out of it. And now I can now introduce the next thing I'm going to be doing tomorrow with them is I'm going to introduce to them what velocity is, or how we can use that velocity to make our planning meetings go smoother, and how we can use that velocity to determine how much more work there is left, roughly,
Okay, so let's take a moment and step back. For people who have never really messed with Scrum and velocity and things like that, after talking earlier during our icebreaker question, the only thing I can think of is you're all getting into race cars and speeding off at the highest possible speed that you can. Now, obviously, that is not the way that this actually works, and that's not how it all works together. But could you take a moment and actually define velocity and what it's used to measure?
Right. I wish I had a sound bite for this.
Oh, but I wouldn't be able to hear it.
No, I meant like just a very quick way of describing velocity. Velocity is, I bet there is a soundbite somewhere for this, but velocity is a measure of how much effort or how much effort a team can put into a sprint. It is a number that is assigned to a team of individuals, and that team doesn't generally change in Scrum. You might introduce a new member every now and again. That means your velocity would generally go up, but it might come down very briefly while you get that new person involved in the team. But eventually the velocity will increase. So this velocity is an arbitrary number that is assigned based on the effort that you assign to your tickets. So let me give you an example. We have 3 items that on the backlog that need to be done. Now, a backlog is just a list of items that need to be done. A product backlog is a list of things that need to be completed for the software. It doesn't have to be complete by the end of it, but your sprint will involve a number of those items. Each of those items will be assigned a value during something called planning poker. Traditionally, we do something called planning poker, which is a separate meeting, which isn't a ceremony. It's just something that we fit in when we can. And we agree between each other. We essentially get the official way, or rather traditional, it's the way I've seen it done is widely varied, but quite often you'll have the people involved in the tickets sat around a table, and they'll hold a card up and they'll say, that's a 4. Someone else will go, that's an 8. Someone else will go, that's a 5. That's a 12, And then you'll all negotiate and agree what you actually believe it is, because you'll discuss the ticket. You'll talk about what work needs to be done. You'll break that down possibly into tasks, although that's usually done in the planning stage rather than in the poker stage, which is before that. And at that point, you get this number. And this number is important not to be based on time. It's meant to be based on relative effort. And that's the key thing that needs that a lot of developers struggle with, because they're like, it's just a number. What am I? So really what it works out with is, say, for example, you have 3 tickets in a sprint, and each of those tickets, just randomly out of the air, are all assigned 20. They're not random, they are relative. So they're assigned a value of 20. You get 2 of those tickets done in the sprint. Your velocity for that sprint is 40. Simple as that. The next sprint, you can take that 40 and you can go, right, we did 40 last time. Let's have a look at the planning poker, the things that we've assigned during planning poker. There's a 3, there's a 5, there's an 8, and there's a 12. Roughly, that adds up to around about 40. Probably, randomly. I don't know if that actually is right. Tell me if I'm wrong. And we'll drag all of those tickets in immediately, and then we'll start talking about them and discussing them and allocating tasks to them. That usually means that we can very quickly say we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but we can't do 6 and 7 because we haven't got time for it. But it's up to the product owner to prioritize which one of those tasks are the most important. If you assign 100 to one of the tickets, you know that that's probably going to go over 2 sprints. So that allows you to plan. That allows you to look at the number, and even though it's the kind of almost picked out of the air, that's what development is, and that's why I see Scrum as the most honest way of doing development, because there's no way in hell any project that has ever, on the face of the planet, that's been completed by human beings, been on time and delivered exactly what they thought they were going to deliver 2 years ago or whenever they started the project. There's no software project ever that has done that.
There's no project in general, period. Like, it makes a difference whether you're talking housing, lawn development, or, anything else. It just doesn't. And it's interesting to me because I think hearing the way you're describing it, when you're like, I know that you have the story points and I know that it is an arbitrary number. And the funny thing is, my brain literally went, it's DKP. It doesn't matter if something, the number, I mean, it doesn't matter if something, are you familiar with DKP?
No, what's DKP? I mean, I don't.
Oh, it's because we were talking about MMOs earlier. DKP is drag and kill points, which is basically a way of tracking which items you can get and making certain everyone has a fair share of loot that drops, etc.
Okay.
But when you set up a system for the team that's working together to ensure that people have a fair crack at it, so they can purchase or buy in this particular case, to kind of use some programming terminology or whatever, they would, whoever is running DKP assigns an arbitrary number. Right. And it doesn't make a difference. Some groups I know would use 250 for a piece of armor. Others would use 25. Mm-hmm. It really makes no difference as long as everyone kind of understands the volume and the scale behind the numbers.
Yes, so it's the scale and the relative numbers that are assigned to the value. So you agree that the best piece of armor that you can get, the best piece of chest armor that you can get from this dungeon is a 200. So you use that number as a relative kind of measure for the rest of the armor that drops or whatever. You're right. Okay, it's exactly the same.
It's sort of like that, but that was what my mind did a jump to, because I think one of the things, especially in development, and it happens with a lot of the people that we talk to try to get on the show. Please, people, come be guests. We like talking to you. But a lot of people seem to have this fear of getting it wrong or getting something wrong. But one of the things I'm realizing when it comes to Scrum is that it's exactly what it's designed to be, not just agile, but flexible, which is basically a synonym into itself. Yes, there is a framework, but you do have the ability to, hell, you could not use typical story points. You could use acorns. I don't care. Whatever it is.
People use T-shirt sizes.
Yes, they do. I was going to say XL, L, S, M. I have seen that one.
It's somewhat, there's all kinds of things, but sometimes, I mean, I have seen it once, I don't think it works very well because it's not relative. And you say that when something about colours, you see colours or you hear or you smell colours. Somebody I've spoke to says something like weird about colours that they can assign a value to it.
Anesthesia?
Yeah, something like that. It's someone I know said that. I'm not sure if it was yourself or someone else.
No.
Anyway, so some people have used colours to assign values to tickets and said that, but the problem with colours is that they aren't relative to each other. You have to then agree that black is the best and green is the worst, or whatever. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's, it's not. It has to be written down somewhere. Whereas if you use something like the Fibonacci scale or a Fibonacci-like scale, or you use T-shirt sizes, or you use milliliters, I don't know, whatever. I'm just thinking of numbers. If you can assign a scale to it. Yeah. Well, I suppose hearts.
Well, see, I mean, that's. I think, like I was saying before, going back to the sort of cons and stuff like that, one of the big things is that there is a big fear of people just getting it wrong. Or you covered the legacy processes, which I wanted to make certain, and that's hysterical. Voltrak just basically pointed out that colors do go in hex, which is so true.
I like that. I'm going to put that up on the chat. So yeah, colours go from
what? That needs to be a T-shirt, Chris.
That's good. I like that.
There you go.
I can't say it out loud though for the podcast listeners because I don't really know how to say that. Colours go from 0x0000 to 0xFFFFFF. So I like that. I think that's brilliant.
You missed an F, but yeah, it is. It's hex.
Yeah.
Hex math is amazing. Base 16. But anyway, but. Going back to some of the other fears that I've had developers tell me, or not necessarily fears, but their hesitancy, the things that stop them, which can be considered a drawback, which is going back to Voltrak's question, keeping the meetings focused. Now, I find it interesting because you've already covered that. I mean, you've made mention of the fact that, at least right now, you recognize that at least the daily scrum is going a little bit overboard and everyone's going to be pulled back. And it's sort of the Scrum Master's job to kind of make certain that you recognize that there are issues and then work to overcome them so that you can keep following the framework.
Yes. I mean, again, there's flexibility in that. If you feel that you are getting value out of a 30-minute Scrum meeting every day, go for it. But the problem is you have to think about more than just you and what you're talking. Because quite often in a Scrum, I'll say, Jeff, I use Jeff and Sarah a lot. I don't work with anyone called Jeff and Sarah. It's just the first names that come to my head.
I use Alice, Bob, etc. from the security world, so it's all good. Go ahead.
Weirdly, we've just, that's interesting because we've got an identity server, a Microsoft identity server logon, and Alice and Bob are the two default logins, so it must be it's part of the security world. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's my BYOM for this week. I didn't know that came from the security world. I thought it was just one of the developers who randomly put those two names in. Anyway, focused meeting. So if you feel like you're getting value out of a 30-minute meeting and you're not wasting other developers' time. So say, for example, I'm talking to Jeff and I talk to Jeff for a few seconds and go, right, so Jeff, you're blocking me. I need this from you for this. And he goes, right, well, that's because of this, this, and this. And I go back to him and then he comes back to me. And nobody else cares about that conversation. That conversation, you have to identify that conversation needs to be taken offline. In the scrum, in the stand-up, the daily scrum. When it comes to things like the planning meeting, you can be a bit more flexible because everyone should be involved, but generally not everybody is involved. So you'll have this 4-hour meeting every 2 weeks that's about planning the work. But the key thing that you need to keep in mind is that Scrum prescribes these ceremonies as time-boxed ceremonies. So as long as you stick to the time box that you agree, you can change the time box. As long as you stick to that time box, you're okay, generally. If you get it done before that, thumbs up, great. You've got extra time to get on with your work. If you get it done... I mean, there was a few weeks ago where we had 3 days of sprint planning. And then that retrospective, I basically brought it up and said, we can't do this. Why did we spend 3 days planning the 2-week sprint? And it was because we didn't put anywhere near enough effort into the backlog during the sprint. Nobody fed into the backlog at all. Nobody logged their tickets during it. The product owner was also not doing their job at all. However, and this is something that should not generally happen in a Scrum environment, the product owner at the moment is very reluctant to take on that role because they've also got work to do and other architectural kind of pieces of work and business pieces of work. That doesn't mean that that means they don't have time for it and they're not willing to accept the fact that they have to manage the backlog, i.e. they need to know what's in the backlog and they have to prioritize the tasks in it. However, we've got to a nice happy medium where we all feed into the backlog, and during the planning meeting we all kind of act as product owners. And we negotiate quite well. We don't really bat heads against each other. We really have worked it out fairly well. And we prioritise the work that needs to be done in the different areas. And we try and cross over, but unfortunately there are some silos, which is not ideal in Scrum, but it is what it is, and it's still much better than what they had previously, if you know what I mean. But I am very slowly,
which is something we discussed in the previous episode too.
Yeah, I'm very slowly introducing that cross-functional team concept to the team and getting people to realize that, right, so Jeff has still got 3 tickets left. Sarah, you don't have any tickets left. So can you do some of Jeff's work? I don't know anything about that. Okay, well, can you maybe spend the next day or 2 or 3 learning about it? Because we've agreed the goal. We've agreed what to do. I know you've got other things to do, but in order to get to this goal, as a team, we are responsible for delivering what we've agreed to deliver to the product owner and, by proxy, the business. So can you, Sarah, have a look at these tickets, see what you can do, and if you can't do anything, at least you can feed stuff back to other people and do a spike or figure something out, And it is about that mindset change of instead of going, I'm the back end guy, I'm the database guy, I'm working on the front end. It doesn't help.
I mean, it goes back to the whole thing that you and I try to push on this show. Share knowledge.
Yes.
End of story. And you can only share knowledge if you have time. I mean, one of the biggest things that one of the biggest complaints that I hear from a lot of people who are in the dev world, myself included, but I'm actually swamped as well with work, is finding the time to learn new things. Our world changes. The more it changes, the more it stays the same. We have to constantly be on the ball, which means like, for example, in that particular scenario, say it's database oriented, take a little bit of time and learn, see what you can figure out. And it is so rare to find time when you are working to do that. So if I were Sarah in that situation, I would have been like, yes, I actually have time. I have finished the other stuff. I have something new I can learn. This is just going to do nothing but help literally add velocity.
And if it doesn't, you've learned something that you can bring up in the retrospective, and you can say, that didn't work, did it, when we gave Sarah that ticket?
Exactly.
So let's think about how we can either improve that process, or maybe we move back to the silo and we give Sarah more work in the next sprint instead of less work. So there's lots of ways that you can be flexible. That's the flexibility that it gives you. It's not about being necessarily flexible with the whole framework. It's about being flexible as a team and moving between tasks as you need to, and agreeing that we have agreed to deliver this feature or this functionality in the software. And it doesn't have to be continuously delivered software either, because a lot of people associate Scrum with continuously delivering software. I disagree with that. I think, yes, it works well in that situation, but I don't think it's necessary. I think you can quite easily do Scrum without it, with traditional kind of cycles.
Well, see, that's the thing. I'm trying to think of anything that is, we'll say, fixed-ended in the development world nowadays.
Fixed-ended? That sounds like a portmanteau.
Well, what I mean is, anything that I can think of that has some type of development to it has some kind of update cycle to it. So I can't.
I've got to use that quote again. That quote that I always use for the paraphrase, the Leonardo da Vinci paraphrase is, software is never finished, only abandoned. It is so appropriate. Since I learned that quote about art, it's perfect, because it never ever, you are always updating it. You're always, I mean, our website, there's so many things to do on it, a ridiculous amount of things to do, and it's never going to be finished.
And the thing is, it never will. But I think that's one of the draws that I have personally to the whole concept of the stuff that you and I do. I mean, I think that's probably why it's so important to have things like milestones, so people can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, they're constantly digging that tunnel, and that can feel very suffocating. Even in an agile environment where you're doing, these almost, we'll say, dopamine hits every 2 weeks, where you're like, hey, look at what we accomplished. Even if it's, we may not have hit the target that we thought, but hey, we now know where we can go with this, and let's try this week and see what happens.
And also,
there's
the retrospective is not just talking about what you haven't done right. It's about talking about what you have done right and celebrating that as well. And it sounds a bit daft, it sounds a bit like, oh, I don't need that in my job. Yeah. But it's nice to have that. It's lovely to see all the tickets on the right-hand side of the board by the end of the sprint. It's brilliant to see that. I love clicking the complete button, because it gives me a sense of satisfaction that we, as a team, not just me, have completed the tasks that we said we were going to complete. And that comes back to the definition of done as well, which is another thing we haven't even really touched upon.
Oh,
we haven't got time,
and Voltrack also said, Miles, I know. Well, this is just a topic I think that's going to have to lead into the next week.
Maybe.
I mean, to be honest, it's worth it, because there is so much to be learned about this particular topic, and I'm really curious about it, because I don't need to use it solo here. Like I said, I jokingly said the voices in my head. I don't need that extra overhead for the stuff that I do, but I can see the benefit of it. Thus, I want to know more about it. And I'm going to use this time to learn it from you. But Volstrak said, milestones are so helpful. Even if there's no end in sight, you at least have a metric to measure progress. And I think that's the important part. And the thing is, I see sprints as kind of being mini milestones.
They're absolutely mini milestones, because you have a goal.
But you're trying... Yeah, you have. Well, God, there is nothing worse than trying to do development without a goal. Let's not do that.
Because you get scope creep.
Oh, yes,
and that's why when I work on the D&I website, on my side projects, or I create tickets in GitHub, and I create various bits and bobs, and I work towards that ticket first and then move on to the next one. Sometimes they'll cross over, and sometimes we'll have to work on two at the same time. But if you don't focus on one task at a time, and this applies to the granular, minuscule things we do on a day-to-day basis as developers, as well as the bigger feature tickets, that you usually work with lots of other people on, there's no chance of you getting any kind of satisfaction from your job if you're never completing the job that you've done. And again, definition of done is really important there, and it's really difficult to define that as well for some teams. And that's one of the things I'm still working on with this team is getting them to agree what done means.
Well, see, that to me it's such an important part, because that's when you can take that deep breath and get that dopamine hit. It's that, right, okay, now that particular ball has been pushed up the mountain. Now we can let it roll down the hill and celebrate it as it runs into a siege weapon or something. I don't know. I just happened to look at the time. We are pretty much coming to the end of our show. So, Chris, are you good with continuing this next week?
Why not?
Because we still have good things. And I still really want to tackle Votrat's question of, is there ever a time where Agile is not a good answer?
I think, we know the answer to that, because there's a good thing for everything, isn't there? There's a good time for everything and a bad time for everything. And of course, But,
can you think of something right off the top of your head where you don't think Agile would work? And I don't mean just one person being involved.
I think,
can you think...
managing my marriage, for example, I don't think Agile would work for managing. Although you could apply a lot of the principles to any... any print,
I could
being married to me is a wonderful experience, I think you'll find, by the way. Right, so off the top of my head, I can't think immediately off the top of my head something that it doesn't work. But the thing is, if you're applying Scrum to something and it's not working and the team's not buying into it and the product owner doesn't care and the Scrum Master's not very good at keeping people, then just sack it off. Because if you're starting off on that foot and you haven't got people invested into the process, the development team can almost be kind of lulled or like coaxed into it. But if the Scrum Master isn't paying any attention to what the team's doing and isn't trying to keep people, at least trying to keep them on track in a lead, in that servant leader way, if they're coming in and cracking the whip, then it's probably a bad. They shouldn't really be a Scrum Master. But if the product owner isn't doing their job properly and you can't come to an agreement as to who owns the backlog, it's a write-off. Then it's a bad idea.
I'm sorry. I just have this picture of like an office door being kicked in and someone walking in and going, "Bow before me. I am the Scrum Master."
Yes. You'd be surprised that it does happen. That kind of thing.
Are you serious?
Maybe not kicking a door in, but honestly, there are some people who see that master title and they think that they're the beat. Is
it the guru thing?
Yes, in a way. It's like the difference is a good Scrum Master is somebody who, I said that word a few times this episode. They enable people and they lead by example. They lead by, but it's the same with any good leader. Really, they don't go in and crack the whip. They don't. Sometimes it's needed to do that.
Managers do that as well. It doesn't even need to be a Scrum Master.
Well, yeah, but the difference between a manager and a Scrum Master is quite vast. A manager is more people manager, whereas a Scrum Manager is managing the process and ensuring that, yes, people are involved, but the people are essentially supposed to manage themselves. There's no such thing as a project manager in Scrum, which we mentioned last time. It doesn't really exist, that role, and sometimes project managers are required or even kind of satellites of, but they generally are involved with things like cost management and customer relationship management and that kind of thing in a Scrum process.
All those
at least.
red black belts. Poor project managers.
A lot of old school project managers don't like Scrum because of it. Anyway, right, so we are definitely at the end of the show now.
We are, yes, we're definitely at the end of our show. We are now at the BYOM. This is the Bring Your Own Manual. This is the part of the show where we share something that we have learned this week. We sometimes have it be very much so about, say, something we're doing programming or project-wise, or it could just be something kind of cool that we learned in life in general, and we go to share it. Chris, what have you learned this week? Is it Alice and Bob?
Well, that is actually a good one, because I didn't, and I just learned that just today, in fact, didn't I? Just during the last hour. That's a great one, but mine's a little bit more serious today. I learned last week that it is possible to absolutely and unequivocally fall in love with an arsehole, because I lost a very dear friend last week. I lost one of our cats, and he was the biggest. He was horrible, right? He was a horrible cat. He pooed everywhere. He cost us an absolute arm and a leg in vet fees. He meowed constantly every night and every day, all this. But I missed the hell out of him, you know. And
Big Meow.
Yeah, Big Meow. God, I'm going to dedicate this episode to Big Meow. I know he couldn't care less, and he wouldn't have cared less. But he was a lovely animal, and I miss the hell out of him. I miss him being next to us. I miss him wanting to go outside all the time and everything. And it's possible to. I learned that it's possible to love something you didn't think you loved that much, if you know what I mean. And I miss him. So anyway, I'll leave that there.
My heart goes out to you when Java passed. The hardest part for me was the weeks after. I forgot to eat lunch because he was literally my lunch reminder. He'd sit right here next to my desk, and his paw and his claws would rake across the back of my arm. And I got so used to him interrupting me in the middle of the day that I remembered to eat, because that was his feed me lunch woman kind of a thing. So when that was gone, it literally felt like the strangest vacuum. And I'm still looking to fill it.
We do little things like, we've got two other cats, and they're lovely. They're actually really
and your guinea pigs
lovely cats,
too.
and we've got lots of guinea pigs, and we love animals in this house. It's a very animal-driven house. But yeah, Big Meow, he was a kind of stray that came to us, and we took him in, and he just was a bit of an old man, and he was kind of waiting to die. He was an old knackered cat, but I loved him in a way. But I was always like, oh God, can we just put him back out? He was just so annoying all the time. But I miss the hell out of him, and I miss everything about him. I miss his really annoying loud meow. It's really let's call it why he's called Big Meow, because he had the loudest meow I've ever heard in a cat ever, and it was heartbreaking having to see him go. But it is where it is, and I don't want to end it on a downer. But that's the only thing I can think of. Thank you very much,
Mike.
Hurts. Yes. Anyway, so Josey, what's your BY?
Not so
down.
Mine's not so personal. Mine's not so personal in the respect. I have been digging into support management.
Okay.
These basic past couple of months, and I have discovered. That's one thing. That's the thing that triggered this particular BYOM. But I tend to do a lot of beta testing for SaaSes that are just starting to get ahead and things like that. I will sit and do everything from UX tests to, betaing whatever their latest features are for whatever product they're offering. And one of the latest ones that I did, they asked a question, and it dawned on me just how challenging it is for those of us who are in the IT industry in general to come up with consistency when it comes to terms. So this particular company had a specific definition for services that was completely different than anything else that I had seen, but it fit what they had set up. And I've basically learned that any SaaS that you use, you have to modify your approach and your team to understand the terms that they use, be it services, resources, connections, integrations, pages. They can all mean something different, even if the tools sort of offer the same things, like a logging platform or something along those lines. They may have just what they believe to be the right term for the right function, and it vastly varies across SaaSes. So when you have somebody who's new coming into a team and they're trying to learn something and they're like, So they overhear someone go, hey, we're going to use this integration. They're like, cool, you guys use integrations with that. What is it you're doing? And they have a completely different definition for integration than someone else does. It just, So my brain has basically exploded with me going, I thought acronyms were a problem. No! Naming in general is a problem.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I declare naming anything in the IT world is crap. I mean, so far, my favorite thing that has been named in IT is Twain.
Twin. Oh, what? It's daft, isn't it? What does it stand for again?
It is an acronym for technology without an interesting name.
That's it. Yeah. I like that.
That is literally what Twain stands for.
One of my sprint backlog items last sprint was because I've re-architected and kind of restructured a monolithic program into lots of little assemblies and things like that. Lots of different classes. I've actually structured it into very distinct layers as well. So I've rewritten pretty much the whole thing. I've kept the kind of fundamental code the same, but the actual structuring is a lot of work to do. But I've done this. Quite a task, quite proud of it, as I usually am with most of my work. But as I've went along, I've just kind of come up with names that I thought were appropriate. And sometimes I'd occasionally get a name off somebody else who's got a bit more context about the software, the part that we're working on. And I'd named I was working on, even it says this in my contract, I was working on a services layer. So I called the things that I was working on, guess what? Services. Right? Nobody liked the name services, right? Everyone was confused about it because there was services here, and previously services were web services, and now these services aren't web services because there's no distinct transport layer abstraction between them. And I'm like, right, what do you want to call it? And we've come up with API, which is, again, fine. Doesn't make much difference to me. It's just a name. So I had to go through and rename hundreds of classes and interfaces and all of the assembly names, etc., because everything was focused around services. And I've done all of that. And then there's something else as well that I need to rename. And then there's also, I haven't even started looking at like the client side stuff because all of that is really oddly named at the moment and it's not that clear. So that's going to be a task that, and not for me probably, but for somebody else. But I'll probably end up doing it because I've got the tools to do it. I use this tool from JetBrains called Resharper, which is a wonderful
tool. You love
tool.
Resharper.
Absolutely. It saves my life. And I constantly, at the moment, when I'm screen sharing and showing people code, a lot of them are going, what did you just do there? And I went, it's a Resharper. You don't have this feature. It's Resharper. What's that test runner that you're using? That's Resharper. What's that? How did you just see that it's Resharper? It's like,
if you know anyone from JetBrains Resharper who wants to say sponsor, I don't know, a podcast for developers, please get in touch.
We should speak to Phil, who we've had on before.
We should totally speak to Phil. Yeah, it's been a little while. But we're at the end of our show now. Thank you to all of you in Twitch chat. You guys are amazing. Big hearts, or, depending upon which country you're in, they have different styles of hearts.
All right.
It's actually a heart.
Makes sense. Yep. Yeah, I get that.
Yep. So,
I know I'm a bit slow normally with the modern, term, but I get that.
I'm older than you, Chris. You got.
Didn't say it was anything to do with age. Just disconnected from it all. You're lucky I'm on a podcast, for God's sake. I don't.
Gosh darn technology, peoples with your bits in your butts. Yeah. Wow, I sounded so Southern there. But anyway, thank you guys so much for your questions, your comments, and everything else within the chat.
Indeed, and you can follow us and follow our website on www.follow our website. What's wrong with me? Tweet our email at... Right, you can visit our website at www.dnistream.live. You can get links to all our social media platforms and all our podcast channels, etc. You can use it to contact us for any reason. If you've got any feedback, you want to be a guest, you've got any corrections you want to send to us. So nobody's sent us an email for ages, so just drop us one, please. Make sure it's working still.
Aww.
Let us know. We haven't even had any spam because the spam protection's so good on the website. And don't forget to follow our Twitch channel, of course, if you haven't already.
Yes. And we hope to see you all next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. GMT, where we will do more Scrum We'll come up with some other fun, punny name or something. But yes, we will see you at twitch.tv/DNIstream. All that is left is to say goodbye. So, ye who is godly, Chris. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
And to everyone, bye-bye.